Hi, this is Soren Barr with Restomod. In this video, we're going to look at our 1950 Chevy 3800 farm truck as we're first placing the cab and bed onto the 2001 Silverado chassis that was the Restomod donor for it. So what you see here is the chassis from the 2001 Silverado is essentially as it was underneath the Silverado. There are a couple things that are a little bit different in it. One of which is the radiator. If you look at that radiator, that's a smaller radiator than it would have been stock in the truck. It actually comes from a C4 Corvette. And the reason for that is that the standard Silverado radiator was a bit wide to fit in the front end of the 1950 truck. The other thing you're going to notice in this is the frame built on top of the chassis that's going to sit below the cab. On the 1950, the frame for the truck would have been flat all the way from front to back, basically allowing that the cab and the pickup bed sat at the exact same level on the frame. In the 2001, and what you see in most modern vehicles, the frame dips down in the middle, allowing for a much larger passenger compartment. Modern manufacturing techniques have allowed for some very complicated forming on the frames, and this is one of the results of that. However, in trying to fit our 1950 cab, we don't want it to sit lower than the bed, so we've built this structure out of tubular steel on top of the frame to essentially support it up at the same level as the pickup bed. As this sets down and as we set the bed down, you'll see that they sit essentially at the same level as they would have on the original truck in relationship to each other. One of the other things you're going to see in this video or on the chassis here is that the frame in front of the axle has been shortened. We've actually cut off the very front part of the frame. In the 1950 truck, many of the aspects, many of the relationships from the wheels to other parts of the truck were very similar to the 2001. However, there was a lot less overhang in the 1950, a lot less of the truck in front of the axle. So we had to shorten the chassis basically to allow the body to sit appropriately. The major crossmember that sits below the radiator is still intact, so the structure is all still there, and we now have a new mount built there for the original bumper to basically sit on the front of that, and that's how it sits today as this truck has been essentially finished. One of the other things you see here is that frame, or that cab is essentially sitting in place on the frame, is that it sits up relatively high on the frame. The running boards for the truck hide most of the frame below the cab there, but one of the interesting things is how low the engine sits compared to the cab itself. So when you look under the hood of that truck today, you'll see that there's an enormous amount of space above that engine. We could easily put an enormous supercharger on that engine if we wanted. There's no shortage of room to fit that without having to do any kind of a hood bulge. So with the cab essentially in place, the bed lowered down in place, this was kind of our first step to really seeing how everything fit together and what we wanted it to look like on the final truck. It took a bit more work to get this to actually all mount up together, but in the end we were able to mount this all up together, and the only concession we had to make between mounting these was essentially the wheelbase mismatch forced us to move the rear fenders slightly to match with the wheelbase of the Silverado frame. In the future, we'd like to come back and resolve that by by modifying the rear suspension, possibly by putting in a 4-bar link suspension in the back, allowing us to match the wheelbase and move the rear fenders back into their stock location. But in this original test fit, this was originally what we did to see how this thing all fit together. Hope you enjoy. Thanks. If you like this, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook or check out our webpage at hennepinrestomods.com.